The desperate call. The sky over Vexar Prime was burning. Not with the warm orange glow of a setting sun, but with the violent fire of orbital bombardment. From 300 meters beneath the planet's surface, Ambassador Crick stood inside an emergency command bunker and watched the tactical displays fill with one devastating image after another. Red markers were disappearing. Defense positions were going dark. Entire cities had stopped transmitting. And everywhere across the planet, Dominion drop pods were falling through the atmosphere like a storm of steel. 7 days. That was how long the Dominion Empire had needed to break the Vexari Republic. 7 days ago, 200 Dominion warships had entered the Vexar system. The Vexari defense fleet had lasted 43 minutes. 43 minutes against an enemy that had come prepared for total war. Now millions of Vexari civilians were hiding beneath the surface, packed into underground shelters while Dominion forces methodically destroyed everything above them. But the Dominion hadn't come for resources. They hadn't come to establish a trade route. They hadn't even come simply to conquer the planet. They wanted obedience. Complete, permanent obedience. The kind of conquest that erased a species' pride and replaced it with fear. Crick had seen what the Dominion did to worlds that resisted. He had studied the reports. He had watched recordings. He had listened to survivors describe what happened when a civilization refused to kneel. But he had always believed those horrors would happen somewhere else. To someone else. Not here. Not on Vexar Prime. Not to his people. Ambassador. Commander Zelk's exhausted voice pulled him away from the tactical display. Crick turned. The Vexari commander looked barely recognizable. Vexari were normally vibrant creatures, their green and brown scales carrying subtle patterns that reflected health and emotion. But after 7 days without proper sleep, Zelk's scales had faded into a dull gray. "We've lost contact with the northern continent," Zelk said. Crick stared at him. Completely. Completely. Another red marker vanished from the display. Zelk continued. The Dominion has activated atmospheric processors. For several seconds, Crick said nothing. Then he closed all 4 of his eyes. Among the Vexari, closing all 4 eyes was an ancient gesture of grief. How long? 3 months before the atmospheric composition becomes dangerous to us. Crick opened his eyes. And after that? Zelk swallowed. Within a year, Ambassador, our own planet will become hostile to our biology. The word struck harder than the explosions shaking the bunker. The Dominion wasn't merely defeating the Vexari. They were changing the planet itself. They intended to make Vexar Prime a world where Vexari could no longer breathe without machines. A prison without walls. Any response from the Celestial Union? Crick asked. He already knew the answer. Refused. The Ephetherans? They claim their fleet is occupied with peacekeeping operations in the Outer Rim. And the Quellins? Zelk hesitated. That hesitation said everything. They're already negotiating trade agreements with the Dominion. Crick slowly turned back toward the communication console. One by one, the names of supposed allies filled the screen. Every request had been rejected. Every treaty had become meaningless. Every promise of mutual defense had disappeared when someone actually needed protection. A violent impact shook the bunker. Dust dropped from the ceiling. Several officers rushed toward the structural monitors. Impact zone? Crick asked. Southern sector. Casualties? We don't know yet. Crick looked at the list again. There had to be someone. Some civilization. Some military. Some government willing to answer. He began scrolling through the database. Most of the major powers were either too far away, too weak, politically compromised, or already frightened of the Dominion. The Empire had spent decades building influence through fear. They didn't merely conquer planets. They made sure nobody wanted to stand beside the planet being conquered. Then Crick stopped. One name appeared on the screen. Earth. Humanity. For several seconds, he simply stared at it. Commander Zelk noticed. No. Crick didn't look at him. Humans. Ambassador, absolutely not. You know something about them? I know enough. Crick turned. Zelk stepped closer. They're barely 2 centuries into interstellar civilization. Their technology is inconsistent. Their military doctrine is disturbing. Their diplomatic behavior is unpredictable. Crick's eyes narrowed. Anything else? Zelk gave him a bitter look. They're insane. Crick almost smiled. In what way? Humans have fought 3 major interstellar wars since achieving faster-than-light travel. And they won all 3. Crick said nothing. Zelk continued. Not because they had the strongest fleets. Not because they possessed the most advanced technology. They simply refused to surrender. He pulled up an archived report. One human colony was attacked by a professional military force. The colony had almost no military equipment. And they surrendered? No. Zelk paused. They armed mining vessels. Crick stared at him. Mining vessels. Mining vessels. And they won. Another report appeared. They have also been documented ramming enemy ships after running out of ammunition. Crick looked back at the screen. Acceptable losses, Zelk muttered. That's a human military concept. Their commanders willingly accept casualties if the objective is considered important enough. Crick studied the name again. Earth. No treaties with the Dominion. No significant political ties. No reason to fear losing trade. No diplomatic obligations. Nothing to protect. Perhaps that was exactly why they were worth calling. They're our last option, Crick said. Zelk shook his head. They might be our last mistake. Crick placed his hand on the communication console. We're already dying. He activated the transmission protocol. What do we have to lose? Zelk stared at him. Possibly our dignity. We lost that 7 days ago. The quantum communicator began establishing a connection. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered. A human appeared. Male. Short gray hair. Weathered face. Dark eyes. He wore a simple black uniform with almost no decoration. Behind him stood a command center filled with tactical displays. The human looked directly into the camera. This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Earth Defense Coalition. His voice was calm. Almost unnervingly calm. We're receiving an unidentified emergency transmission. State your situation. Crick straightened. This is Ambassador Crick of the Vexari Republic. He forced his voice to remain steady. Our home world is under attack by the Dominion Empire. Our defense fleet has been destroyed. Our population is facing extermination or permanent enslavement. He paused. Then said the words that no ambassador ever wanted to say. We formally request immediate military assistance from Earth. Chen didn't react. For a moment, Crick thought the connection had frozen. Then Chen glanced toward someone outside the camera's view. Ambassador, I'm reading your location as the Vexar system. Correct. Approximately 47 light-years from our nearest established outpost. Correct. Chen nodded. You understand that Earth has no mutual defense treaty with your government. I understand. No trade agreement. I understand. No political obligation. Crick's throat tightened. We have nothing to offer you. He looked toward the tactical screen. Another civilian shelter had gone dark. Nothing except gratitude. His voice cracked. The Dominion is modifying our atmosphere. Millions of civilians are trapped underground. Their drilling machines are already approaching the shelters. He took a breath. We don't need a fleet. Chen's eyes remained fixed on him. We don't need a miracle. Crick looked directly into the camera. Send us anything. Silence. Chen lowered his eyes. Crick could hear voices in the background. A discussion. Then an argument. Chen raised one hand, silencing whoever was speaking. When he looked back at Crick, something had changed. Ambassador. Yes. I'm going to tell you something directly. Chen leaned forward. The Dominion has been on our watch list for years. Crick felt his stomach sink. Here it came. The refusal. Earth would explain that its own borders were threatened. They would say they couldn't afford another war. They would say the Vexar system was too far away. They would say they were sorry. Chen continued. They've been probing our defenses. Crick listened. We expected them to eventually move against Earth. The ambassador's shoulders lowered. Then Chen said something unexpected. They made a mistake. Crick looked up. What? The Dominion made a strategic mistake. Chen's expression hardened. They attacked you first. Crick didn't understand. Chen continued. They showed us exactly what they're willing to do. His voice became colder. Genocide. Planetary occupation. Atmospheric modification. Civilian targeting. A faint smile appeared. Earth doesn't like bullies. Crick stared at him. Especially genocidal ones. The ambassador's heart began beating faster. Admiral. You asked us for help. Chen turned away from the camera. You're getting it. He spoke to someone in the command center. Prepare the Prometheus. A voice answered. Full combat configuration. Full combat configuration. Chen continued. Signal the Mars fleet. Another officer acknowledged the order. Operation Hammer is active. Crick froze. Admiral, you should understand what you're facing. Chen looked back. The Dominion has 200 ships in our system. I know. Their shields are extremely advanced. I know. Conventional weapons will have difficulty penetrating them. Chen smiled. Ambassador, you told us to send anything. He paused. You didn't specify a size limit. Crick blinked. Chen leaned back. The Prometheus is 2.3 kilometers long. Zelk, standing beside Crick, whispered something in disbelief. Chen continued. She's armed with weapons that violate 15 Galactic Accord treaties. He paused. Fortunately, Earth never signed those treaties. Crick stared. How long until arrival? 18 hours. Zelk stepped forward. 18 hours. Chen nodded. Approximately. That's impossible. Standard FTL would take weeks. Chen smiled. Humans don't use standard FTL. The transmission ended. Crick and Zelk stared at the blank screen. For the first time in 7 days, nobody in the bunker spoke. Above them, Dominion weapons continued pounding Vexar Prime. The drilling machines were moving closer. The planet was dying. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity was coming. And nobody on Vexar Prime yet understood what that meant. The human answer 17 hours and 43 minutes after the transmission ended, every sensor in the Vexar system activated at once. Warnings filled the Dominion fleet's tactical displays. The readings made no sense. Something was approaching. Something enormous. Commander Thrax stood aboard the Dominion flagship, the Inexorable Might, and stared at the central display. What am I looking at? His sensor officer swallowed. We don't know, Commander. Then find out. We're trying. The display showed a gravitational disturbance moving toward the fleet. Fast. Far too fast. Thrax narrowed his eyes. How large? The sensor officer hesitated. Approximately 2 kilometers. Thrax laughed. That's impossible. Sir. No species builds warships that large. It's getting closer. Then your sensors are malfunctioning. The officer looked terrified. Sir, all sensor arrays are reporting the same thing. The bridge went silent. Then space tore open. 300,000 kilometers from the Dominion fleet, reality itself appeared to split apart. A massive distortion formed. Energy rippled across the darkness. The Dominion ships automatically raised their shields. Then something came through. At first, it looked like a shadow. Then the tactical systems identified it. The UES Prometheus. Humanity's answer to the Vexari distress call. The ship emerged from what humans called a hellspace jump. And every Dominion officer who saw it understood the same thing. They had never seen a warship like this. The Prometheus was 2.3 kilometers long. Nearly half a kilometer wide. Its hull was not elegant. There were no graceful curves. No decorative structures. No attempt to make it beautiful. It looked like someone had taken a fortress and taught it how to fly. Massive armor plates covered its exterior. Weapons protruded from almost every section. Heavy siege shields surrounded the vessel. The entire ship looked brutally practical. In the Vexari bunker, Crick stared at the tactical display. His mouth fell open. That's a warship. Zelk whispered. No. He stared at the Prometheus. That's a mobile fortress. Crick couldn't disagree. Then the Prometheus moved. It didn't transmit a declaration. It didn't demand surrender. It didn't issue a warning. Its weapons bays opened. Hundreds of smaller craft emerged. The Dominion fleet reacted immediately. All ships. Thrax shouted. Concentrate fire. 200 Dominion warships turned their weapons toward the human vessel. Energy beams filled space. Plasma torpedoes followed. Missiles. Particle weapons. Everything the Dominion possessed was directed at one target. The Prometheus. For several seconds, the space around the human ship disappeared beneath the barrage. Then the weapons passed through something that shouldn't have existed. The Prometheus remained untouched. No shield flare. No visible impact. Nothing. A Dominion sensor officer stared at his console. Commander. What? They're shields. What about them? They aren't energy shields. Thrax turned. What? They're folding space around the vessel. The officer's voice trembled. Our weapons aren't being absorbed. Then what? They're being redirected. Thrax's face changed. Where? The officer stared at the impossible readings. Somewhere else. The Prometheus fired. Its primary weapon ran almost the entire length of the vessel. It didn't resemble a conventional cannon. There was no projectile. No visible beam. Instead, space itself distorted. The weapon fired a reality spike. The shot crossed hundreds of thousands of kilometers almost instantly. It struck the Dominion heavy cruiser dominant fist. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the cruiser disappeared. Not exploded. Not broke apart. Disappeared. Its molecular structure unraveled. 3,000 Dominion crew members vanished with it. Thrax stared. Impossible. The Prometheus fired again. Another Dominion vessel vanished. Then another. The human warship began accelerating. Hundreds of weapons activated across its hull. Mass drivers launched relativistic projectiles. Plasma cannons released streams of superheated matter. Missile pods opened. The missiles disappeared. Then reappeared inside Dominion defensive barriers. Explosions erupted from within the fleet. The Dominion formation broke. Their perfect military discipline was collapsing. Ships turned in different directions. Some attempted to retreat. Others tried to concentrate fire. None of it mattered. Human weapons were appearing where Dominion defenses couldn't reach. The Vexari watched in stunned silence. For 7 days, the Dominion had seemed unstoppable. Now they were running. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Sarah Conway watched the tactical display. She didn't look excited. She didn't look angry. She looked focused. Status? A weapons officer answered. Automated platforms have engaged 17% of enemy forces. Conway nodded. Reapers? Ready. Nova cannon. Charging. Conway looked at the tactical display. Launch the Reapers. The Prometheus opened its fighter bays. 300 craft launched. The Vexari had seen fighter craft before. These were different. They were smaller, faster, and terrifyingly aggressive. Human pilots controlled them. Pilots trained to survive maneuvers that would kill most species. The Reapers entered the Dominion formation. The Dominion fighters attempted to intercept them. They failed. Human pilots weren't fighting according to conventional doctrine. They weren't maintaining predictable formations. They weren't conserving energy. They weren't giving their opponents time to react. They were hunting. One Reaper vanished. A Dominion pilot relaxed. Then the human craft reappeared directly behind him. An antimatter torpedo entered his engine compartment. The Reaper disappeared before the explosion. Another human fighter jumped between two cruisers. It fired at point-blank range. Then jumped away. The Dominion vessel exploded. The battle became chaos. In less than 30 minutes, 40 Dominion warships had been destroyed. Dozens more were crippled. And the atmospheric processors were being eliminated one by one. Human fighters didn't waste ammunition on random targets. They went directly for the machinery transforming Vexar Prime's atmosphere. One processor exploded. Then another. Then another. In the bunker, Zelk stared at the display. They're not just rescuing us. Crick nodded slowly. No. Zelk watched another Dominion vessel disappear. They're making a statement. The Hammer Falls commander Thrax understood the truth. His fleet could not win. But Dominion doctrine had one final response. Overwhelming concentration of force. All remaining ships. Thrax shouted. Form on the flagship. The Dominion vessels began converging. Their surviving ships formed a massive attack formation. Every remaining weapon was aimed at the Prometheus. Thrax's voice filled the fleet channel. We will breach their defenses. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Conway watched the formation assemble. Then she smiled. They're grouping together. Her weapons officer understood immediately. Nova cannon. Fire. The Nova cannon was one of humanity's most terrifying inventions. It answered a question no sane civilization had ever asked. What would happen if you turned a miniature star into a weapon? The Prometheus drew power from 3 fusion reactors. Energy flooded through massive containment systems. Hydrogen was compressed. Fusion began. The weapon charged. Space around the cannon distorted. The Dominion fleet continued advancing. Then the Nova cannon fired. For a fraction of a second, the battlefield became brighter than a star. A concentrated stellar eruption crossed the distance between the fleets. The beam struck the Dominion formation. 70 ships vanished. Not exploded. Vanished. Their hulls were reduced to matter. Matter was broken apart. Molecules became atoms. Atoms became particles. Particles were consumed by the energy of the weapon. The Dominion formation collapsed. The surviving ships turned and fled. There was no longer an organized military force. There was only panic. Ships jumped to FTL without waiting for authorization. Commanders abandoned formations. Captains ignored orders. The Dominion Empire had arrived 7 days earlier, believing itself to be the most powerful force in the Vexar system. Now its survivors were running from a single human warship. The Inexorable Might was one of the few ships that escaped. As the flagship prepared its FTL drive, Thrak stared at the battlefield. Hundreds of his ships were gone. His invasion force had been destroyed. His mission had failed. His enemy had arrived less than a day ago. Thrax opened a secure channel to Dominion High Command. His voice was quiet. Do not provoke the humans. Then he jumped. The aftermath silence returned to Vexar Prime. Not complete silence. Emergency signals still filled the communication network. Medical teams were working. Shelters were being opened. Rescue operations were beginning. But the bombardment had stopped. For the first time in 7 days, Vexar Prime wasn't being attacked. The Prometheus moved into orbit. Its enormous silhouette blocked a portion of the stars. Ambassador Crick received a communication request. He accepted it. Admiral Sarah Conway appeared on the screen. She looked remarkably calm. Ambassador. Crick struggled to find words. Admiral. We've eliminated the immediate threat. Crick looked toward the tactical display. Immediate threat? Conway nodded. The atmospheric processors are gone. Our medical frigates are already moving toward your major population centers. Crick stared at her. You destroyed their fleet. Most of it. The Dominion has never lost a fleet like this. Conway didn't respond. Crick swallowed. The entire galaxy is going to know what happened. Yes. There will be political consequences. Almost certainly. Crick leaned closer. Why? Conway looked at him. Why did Earth do this? Crick shook his head. We had no treaty with you. No. No resources. No. Nothing to trade. Correct. Then why? Conway was silent for a moment. Then she answered. You asked for help. Crick blinked. That's it? You didn't threaten us. No. You didn't offer us some secret resource. No. You didn't promise political favors. No. You admitted you had nothing to give us except gratitude. Crick said nothing. Conway's expression softened. Do you know how unusual that is? She continued. Most governments in this galaxy negotiate before they help. They calculate what they'll gain. They ask what the alliance is worth. She looked away briefly. Your people were dying. Crick's eyes lowered. We couldn't save ourselves. I know. Why us? Conway smiled faintly. Because eventually the Dominion was going to come for Earth. Crick looked up. So you used us as a first strike? Not exactly. Conway shook her head. We saved your people. Then her expression became serious. And we sent the Dominion a message. Crick looked through the command center window toward the enormous human ship. Humanity has been watching for 2 centuries, Conway said. We've watched civilizations rise. She paused. We've watched them collapse. Watched empires conquer weaker species. Watched governments debate while entire populations disappeared. Crick listened. We learned something. What? Conway looked directly at him. If we're ever going to act, we can't act halfway. Crick's 4 eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Conway's answer was quiet. It means when humanity decides to intervene, we intend to end the threat. Crick stared at her. Your people are young. We are. Some species consider you primitive. We know. They'll be afraid of you now. Conway smiled. That's probably useful. Crick looked at the battlefield outside. The remains of the Dominion fleet drifted across space. A force that had seemed unstoppable only hours earlier was now nothing more than debris. What are humans? He finally asked. Conway considered the question. Then she answered. We're the species that learned how to survive. She paused. And sometimes survival means becoming something your enemies are afraid to face. Crick looked at her. That's frightening. It should be. The Admiral's voice softened. But your people are safe. The connection remained open for another few seconds. Then Conway added one final sentence. If anyone threatens Vexar Prime again, call us. The transmission ended. Crick remained motionless. Behind him, Commander Zelk approached. What do you think? Crick looked out at the Prometheus. I think the galaxy just changed. The new age within days, news of the battle spread across the galaxy. At first, governments refused to believe the reports. A single human warship had destroyed a Dominion invasion fleet. Impossible. The Dominion had 200 ships. The humans had sent one. The Dominion had advanced shields. Human weapons had ignored them. The Dominion had decades of military experience. The humans had destroyed their formation in less than an hour. Then the recordings appeared. Sensor footage. Combat telemetry. Survivor reports. The truth became impossible to deny. Humanity had entered the galactic stage. And it had not arrived with diplomats. It had not arrived with trade agreements. It had not arrived asking permission. It had arrived with the Prometheus. A warship 2.3 kilometers long. A vessel built not to intimidate, but to win. Across the galaxy, military commanders began studying the battle. They studied the strange shields. The reality spikes. The Reaper fighters. The Nova cannon. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't technological. It was psychological. The humans had not fought because they hated the Dominion. They hadn't fought because they wanted Vexari territory. They hadn't fought because there was some hidden resource beneath Vexar Prime. They had fought because someone asked for help. That idea frightened many governments more than the weapons. Because it meant humanity's military power wasn't necessarily controlled by ambition. It could be activated by principle. The Dominion had spent decades teaching the galaxy to fear it. Humanity had spent 2 centuries learning something else. How to make monsters afraid. And Vexar Prime became the place where everyone learned the difference. In the darkness above the planet, the Prometheus remained in orbit. Its engines glowed faintly against the stars. Its armor reflected the light of the ruined battlefield. To the Vexari, it looked like a guardian. To the Dominion, it looked like a nightmare. To the rest of the galaxy, it was a warning. Earth was no longer watching from the sidelines. Humanity had finally decided to step onto the stage. And the galaxy was about to discover what happened when the youngest civilization became the one willing to fight for everyone else. The age of human intervention had begun.